Honorable judges, ladies and gentlemen, Peter Drucker ever say that the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not turbulence itself, but to act with yesterday logic. For decades, we have relied on the same disaster management approach. Nurses are expected to save life on the front line, but rarely invited to make the policies that protect people's life. Perhaps this is exactly what Peter Drucker means by acting with yesterday logic. So, let me ask you a question. Who is the first to stand beside people when disaster strikes? The answer is a nurse. But let me ask you another question. If nurses are always on the front line of disaster, why are their voices so rarely heard when disaster policies are made? That is the paradox I would like to highlight for today. So, according to the World Health Organization, a disaster is a very serious disruption to the functioning of a community or society that causes widespread human, economic, and environmental losses. Unfortunately, this is not just a definition. Over the past 5 years, disasters have repeatedly struck Indonesia. It claiming lives, affecting millions, and overwhelming our healthcare system. So that's why disaster management is not only about responding quickly after a disaster happens. This is about creating the right policies before the disaster occurs. So, who truly understands the needs of disaster survivors? The answer is still a nurse. Nurses are the largest healthcare workforce and play a very vital role throughout the entire disaster management cycle. The International Council of Nurses recognizes nurses as the key contributors in mitigation, start from preparedness, responses, recovery, public education, research, and policy advocacy. But ironically, research from Hamid et al. For 2025 found that nurses in Indonesia are still involved mainly after disaster occur, rather than before disaster are prevented. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is time for us to change the paradigm. Nurses should not only be recognized as the first responders, they deserve a seat to the decision-making table. And to achieve this vision, I propose the Nurse Voice Framework. First, National Nursing Disaster Policy Council to ensure nurses have a formal representation in disaster policy making. Second, Unified Disaster Nursing Competencies to strengthen nurses' leadership and disaster management competencies. Third, Research to Policy Integration to translate nursing research into evidence-based disaster policy. Fourth, Simulation-based Policy Lab to bring together nurses and policymakers in disaster simulation that improve future policies. And finally, integrated nursing disaster dashboard. I want to make a real-time digital platform that support faster and evidence-based decision-making during disasters. So, ladies and gentlemen, a national resilience is not measured only by how quickly it responds to disaster. This is also measured by who is given the opportunity to shape the policies before a disaster happens. So, if nurses understand the needs of community better than anyone else, so their voices should not stop at the patients beside. Their voices deserve to be heard where the most important decisions are made, because saving life is a noble mission. By creating policies that protect millions of lives, is an even greater legacy. Thank you so much.